Hello, welcome to the next lesson. Today is an exciting one because we're going to meet Romeo. And this happens in Act 1, around line 115. And I want you to turn to your text and follow with me. The first time that we meet Romeo, we don't meet him himself, we meet him through Benvolio on line 116. We're going to take a look at some of these lines a little bit more closely today. So in line 116, Lady Montague, Romeo's mother, has asked, "Have you seen Romeo?" And here's what Benvolio says. He says, "Madam, an hour before the warship's sun peered forth the golden window of the east, a troubled mind drove me to walk abroad, where underneath the grove of sycamore, the westward routeth from the city side, so early walking did I see your son." It's very interesting here that we see Romeo from someone else's perspective. What we have here is setting up an idea that's in the text is these dichotomies. Dichotomy is something that has two sides, night and day, hot and cold. The dichotomy we see here is this external perspective. So externally, Benvolio sees Romeo and then tells this to Romeo's mother. We have some other ideas in here of the dichotomy that will continue throughout the text is subjectivity and objectivity. Subjectivity is me, what I know, what I think. And then when I look at you, I don't know what you think. That's objectivity. I can understand your situation better than you can because you are subjective about that experience. This is true for Romeo as well in the text. We learn from Montague, Romeo's father, that Romeo has been, and this is around line 130, with tears augmenting the fresh morning's dew. He's been crying, Romeo's been crying, adding to clouds more clouds with his deep sigh. This is Romeo's emotional state, he's very upset. But all so soon as the all-cheering sun should in the farthest east begin to draw the shady curtains from Aurora's bed, away from light steals home my heavy sun. When the sun comes up and outside, the day is very beautiful, objectively. Subjectively, Romeo goes into his room and pulls down the curtains and makes for himself, in line 138, he makes an artificial night. This is another dichotomy we have set up here between something that is natural and something that is artificial. So in the natural world, it's a beautiful day. But in the artificial world of Romeo's emotional state, he's in a dark room and a dark spot. And no one can really understand why he feels this way. In fact, we see in the text that they're wondering what the cause of Romeo's unhappiness is. And that's around line 141. We can see that line of the cause. He says, "My noble uncle," this is Benvolio talking to Montague, "do you know the cause?" And Montague says, "I neither know it nor can learn of him." This is an interesting dichotomy as well. How can we know someone else's emotional state? We can't just see it. They have to tell us. And Romeo's not talking to anyone. He's shut himself off from the world. Okay, I think what this does is it gives us a few kind of ideas about love. This play is about love. It's about the tragedy of love. But what is it saying about it? I think one comment that it's making is that love is a psychological, irrational state. Because Romeo is doing something irrational. He's making himself an artificial knight. I think more generally it's making a comment about love is that we can't ever know how someone else feels. They have to tell us. It's very interesting. So when Benvolio finally meets Romeo, and this happens around line 159. So let's turn to that in the text. Benvolio says, "Good morrow, cousin." And Romeo says, "Is the day so young?" Romeo is not even aware of time, of the external world at all. He's completely trapped in his internal, subjective world. And Benvolio says, "But news struck 9. It's 9 o'clock in the morning." And Romeo says this, "Ay me, sad hours seem long." This again adds to the idea that there's this natural world where time is passing. But Romeo's not even aware of it. He's inside this external, subjective world. He's outside of time because of his psychological state. Okay, Benvolio asks him what's going on, and he asks him, "Are you in love?" And Romeo says, "Out." In other words, he's out of love. who he loves is a girl named Rosalind, and Benvolio starts to give Romeo some advice. This advice happens around, I think it's line 82, 87, and 45 and 50. So we jump around here a little bit. The first bit of advice he gives, this starts to happen in the second scene, but he tells him the way that you can escape this love you have for Rosalind is through contrasting her with someone else. You take a look at another person, you'll find someone else you love, and you'll forget about Rosalind. And Romeo doesn't agree with this idea. He says that he has a great, he's very devout to Rosalind. But we're going to find out later he's not very devout to Rosalind at all as soon as he sees Juliet. So the lines there is line 45 in scene 2. And this is what Benvolio says. He says, "Tut, man, one fire burns out another's burning. One pain is lessened by another anguish. Turn giddy, be happy, and be hope by backward turning. One desperate grief cures with another languish. Take thou some new infection in thy eye, and the rank poison of the old will die." This is very sound advice. If you have something that happens here, just do something over here. Very balanced. The advice continues over on line 84, 83, around there. Benvolio invites Romeo to go to the Capulets' masquerade party. And he tells him there, "At this same ancient feast of Capulets sups," I mean, she's eating there, "the fair Rosalind, whom thou so loves, with all the admired beauties of Verona." So he tells Romeo, when you go to this party, Rosalind's going to be there. There'll be all these other beautiful girls too. And you should, line 86, "compare her face with some that I shall show." So look at Rosalind and then look at these others and see if she compares. "And I will make your swan a crow." Nice little line there. But Romeo says on line 88, "When the devout religion of mine eye maintains such falsehood, then turn tears to fire." It's impossible. I'll never be able to look at one person and overcome Rosalind. We're going to learn in the next lesson that actually that's not true. He's not quite as devout as he should be. Okay, so hopefully we've seen some of these dichotomies that are set up. The idea that one pain can replace another, or the idea of artificial night versus the natural daylight, or natural time versus the subjective time. Another thing we're going to see that continues throughout is this dichotomy of light and darkness. And I asked you to look for that in the text. So where Romeo has that natural light and this artificial darkness. In the next lesson, when he first sees Juliet, he's going to use that same idea to describe her, first as the moon, and then later as the sun. Really interesting too. We'll take a look at that later. So I want to look more closely at one of Romeo's very famous short monologues. And this is one of the first times that he actually speaks beautifully in the text. We'll see this on line 169 to line 181. And what I want to look for in this section is his use of two literary devices. One is called oxymoron. An oxymoron is when you take two words that shouldn't go together, have opposite meanings, and you put them together. An example might be if I have someone in a movie who's a really big, strong guy, and then we call him Tiny. This is my friend Tiny, but he's huge. That's an oxymoron. The other one is similar. It's called antithesis. Anti-thesis, the opposite idea. This is when you take two words that are opposites and you use them in a phrase. Romeo makes wonderful use of these in describing what he thinks of love in these lines. Let's take a look at it. He says, line 169, "Alas, that love, whose view is muffled still, should without eyes see pathways to his will. Where shall we dine? O me, what fray was here? Yet tell me not, for I have heard it all." This is where Romeo comes and he sees the fight and he thinks, I don't even care about that. Again, dismissing objective reality. And here are the antitheses and the oxymorons. "Here's much to do with hate, but more with love." Antithesis. "Why then, oh, brawling love?" That's fighting love. That's an oxymoron. Or loving hate. oxymoron. Oh, anything of nothing first create. Anything, nothing. Oh, heavy lightness, serious vanity. Misshapen chaos of well-seeming forms, chaos and form, heavy lightness, serious vanity. Feather of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health, still waking sleep. That is not what it is. This love I feel no love in this. Dost thou not laugh? This is such a wonderful idea of how we feel when we're in love, especially when we're in the kind of love that Romeo is experiencing right now, which is called unrequited love. He loves someone, but they don't love him back. I think probably, if you haven't experienced this yet, you will at some point in your life, sadly. And you might feel very much like what Romeo feels, that love is not what it should be. I think when we look at the text, we have some ideas about symbolism that I wanted you to look for, about light and darkness. And now we're starting to get some of our philosophical ideas about love. And as we read through, we can see there are different kinds of love in this text. Romeo here is talking about this unrequited love. But actually we're going to learn that the love that Romeo feels for Rosalind is not love at all. It's a lesser kind of love that we call infatuation. He has a crush on her. That's all it is. And he can quickly forget her when he meets Juliet. And then what is the love that he feels for Juliet? That'll be another question we can ask. Or what is the love that he feels for his friends? Or the love that he feels for his parents? There's a lot of complexities in the love here, and that's part of what this play is discussing or suggesting about this psychological state. So let's look a little bit at Romeo's relationship with Benvolio, and we can go back to earlier when I mentioned how we can use meter in the play to see the relationship between characters. I just want to show one example of this to remind you. Right after Romeo's speech with these antitheses and these oxymorons, dost thou not laugh? And Benvolio says, no, cuz, I rather weep. Do you see how they ended each other's lines there? Dost thou not laugh? No, cause I rather weep. It's iambic pentameter, the 10 syllables, but he finishes his line. And then Romeo says, good heart at what? At thy heart's oppression. We have the same thing again, and then Romeo ends that line, why such is love's transgression, which ends the meter on the previous line. And they also rhyme, oppression and transgression. What does this reveal for us as readers is that Benvolio and Romeo are good friends. Next time, I want to look at when Romeo meets Juliet, and we're going to start to get more insights into Romeo's character, and also this question about love, and some aspects of how the form of tragedy works. So, prepare yourself for the next lesson when we get to meet Juliet.